going to hear from me about what President Trump has done to secure our values, our culture, and our way of life from the unwavering assault from the radical left and the communists and the Democrat Party. One of the most significant crises that President Trump inherited upon taking office was the wave of racial discrimination, so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that have taken over both public sector and private sector entities all across the United States of America. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this is that our air traffic controllers were being hired and promoted based on race and gender, not their ability to conduct our nation's air traffic. I would estimate that probably 90% of Americans would agree with the statement that airline safety should be based on your ability to keep, airline safety jobs should be based on your ability to keep planes landing and taking off and flying safely, not on what demographic box you check. President Trump has ended across the entire federal government all hiring, recruiting, retention, promotion, and training based on race and sex. This includes in our law enforcement agencies. So again, when we took office, even in sensitive law enforcement, national security, and intelligence agencies, we were hiring individuals not on their ability to carry a weapon, not on their ability to keep Americans safe, not on their ability to conduct sensitive intelligence operations, but based upon race and sex. And obviously, that is unacceptable. It's going to be merit-based across the whole federal government. But this wasn't just the federal government. This was the private sector, and this was also, of course, our entire university and education system. So President Trump's Department of Justice, working with other departments and agencies, have made clear that this administration is going to fully enforce Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX of our federal civil rights code. Discrimination based on race and sex is prohibited by law, and this administration will vigorously enforce that. And companies, small or large, that violate plain text of federal statutes will face appropriate financial and other penalties. This administration is not going to let our society devolve into communist, woke, DEI strangulation. We are going to have a system of merit, which is not just a social and cultural issue, it's an economic issue. When you hire, retain, and recruit based on merit, as President Trump has directed, you advance innovation, you advance growth, you advance investment, you advance job creation, you create the best and safest product for all Americans. When a citizen goes to, say, a hospital in a medical emergency, they don't care what race or sex their doctor or their nurse is. They want the best treatment they can get in that emergency. When they're flying a plane or when they're on an aircraft, they want that pilot to be the best pilot, the safest pilot, not caring what that pilot's race or sex is. This applies across the whole government. In particular, looking at our university system, this administration has opened investigations into universities across the country for violating, and we talk a lot about Supreme Court rulings, universities across this country are in plain and direct violation of the Supreme Court's ruling that affirmative action, as in racial quotas and set-asides, are illegal. Students must be admitted to universities on a color-blind basis. But we have demonstrated through clear evidence that our university system, including our medical schools, and perhaps particularly our medical schools, are engaging in race-based discrimination, racial set-asides, racial quota schemes, and other efforts to evade the Supreme Court's ruling, and again, the plain text of federal statute. So universities are on notice, and universities are already facing the financial consequences of their noncompliance with federal law. The clearest example that we're all familiar with, of course, being Harvard, which is engaged in repeat, systemic, and sustained violations of federal civil rights law. Another area of civil rights law that we talk about a lot, of course, is Title IX, sex-based discrimination. And this administration ended the Biden administration's policy and the Democrat Party's policy of allowing men into women's sports, men into women's spaces. We are using every single legal and financial tool we have at President Trump's direction to make it clear that schools and universities are and will lose federal funds, as you've seen in Maine, if you allow men to invade women's sports and women's spaces. and this applies to our whole K through 12 system, the Department of Justice is also coordinating with state and local law enforcement to fight child abuse in our school systems. It is child abuse to change a child's gender, particularly if you do not inform the parents. In other words, if a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old goes to school, or a 7-year-old goes to school, and the teacher tries to turn the boy into a girl or the girl into a boy, that is child abuse. And this administration is treating that as child abuse. And it is a gross violation of parental rights. This also includes the administration's message to our hospital systems that they cannot and will not be allowed to use taxpayer dollars to perform chemical castrations and sexual mutilations of children. Castration surgeries, castration drugs, sterilization treatments of children are barbaric. They violate all sound medical ethics. They are completely unwarranted. They harm children for life irreversibly. It is child torture. It is child abuse. It is medical malpractice. And so the Department of Health and Human Services, under the leadership of Bobby Kennedy, as well as the Department of Justice and other departments of this government, are making clear to our medical providers and our hospital systems that you cannot use taxpayer dollars to perform these barbaric procedures on America's children. And HHS has systematically eliminated all of the junk, fake science that was produced under the Biden administration promoting sex changes on children, promoting the idea of sterilizing children. That's been cleaned out. That's been removed, and new guidance is being issued to doctors and hospitals advising them that they cannot perform these horrifying procedures, these irreversible procedures on our nation's children. We are also making clear in our prison system, male prisoners will not be allowed into women's prisons. The Biden administration promoted prison rape by putting men into female prisons. That is obviously insane, cruel, and unacceptable. And even though the Democrat Party and Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrat media continue to fight to put men into women's prisons, this administration will not allow that. And will not allow men, as well, in our K through 12 system, into women's private spaces and restrooms. We have seen horrifying example after example of young girls being sexually assaulted because school districts have allowed men into women's and girls' private spaces. This administration, President Trump, is at the forefront of protecting women and protecting girls. And nowhere is that clearer than when we are talking about fighting radical gender ideology. This administration is also fighting to get critical race theory out of our school districts. Children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology. For any nation to be successful, it cannot teach its children to hate themselves and to hate their country. So these are a few of the areas in which President Trump has fought the cancerous communist woke culture that was destroying this country, where we were led to believe that men were women, that women were men, that racial discrimination was good, that merit was bad, and that safety and physical security mattered less than the feelings of liberal ideologues. The president has also fought to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of protecting public safety and locking up violent criminals, instead of using the Department of Justice to target conservatives, to target Christians, to target people of faith. The last administration cruelly and shamefully used the power of the Justice Department to go after law-abiding Americans, in particular Trump supporters, conservatives, and Christians. That persecution has ended. The Department of Justice and the FBI are back in the business of going after bad guys, of going after gangs, of going after criminals, and keeping Americans safe. Let me just conclude before taking questions by noting that when you look at the sweep of the first 100 days, every single crisis that has afflicted America for years, sometimes decades, sometimes generations, this president has fought head on. He has taken on every entrenched power structure and system all across this government, this swamp, this town. That includes, of course, the Doge efforts to slash corrupt, wasteful government spending, graft, and corruption, and to stop billions of taxpayer dollars from going to radical left NGOs. These are left-wing nonprofits that are used to advance illegal immigration, to advance open borders, to advance gender ideology, and to advance all of this insanity that has been turning our country in the wrong direction for so many years. President Trump took head on the trade crisis afflicting this country with the destruction of our manufacturing and industrial base, the shameful betrayal of the American worker by Joe Biden and the globalists that sent all of our supply chains overseas. He took head on the catastrophe of mass, unlimited illegal immigration that was turning us into a failed third world state, and achieved the lowest level of illegal immigration in recorded history without even a close second. He took on the economic crisis afflicting this country by reopening American energy, by defeating inflation, by lowering gas prices, by ending the onslaught and reversing the onslaught of federal regulation, by reopening coal, shale, oil, natural gas, and fighting now for the largest tax cut and reform and the largest deregulation reform and the largest energy reform in American history. These are just some of the things that have ushered in the new golden age, along with his fight to restore the peace that we had for 4 years under the previous administration before Joe Biden sunk this planet into bloodshed and war in the Middle East, in Europe, and rising tensions in Asia. President Trump, in every area of conflict around the globe, has been fighting to restore peace, security, stability, harmony. So he inherited an economic catastrophe, a border catastrophe, a public safety catastrophe, and a cultural catastrophe. And in every case, he has reversed those catastrophes and brought America into the new golden age. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. And as always, we'll start with our new media seat today. Chris Bedford.